Alrighty, so I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible just to give you a little taste of what Unity can do, but also how, and more importantly, probably how I use it. Or so this is only going to be a fraction. So let's just open it up. We'll get cracking. I'll better sync up my cameras. So we're going to make a new document. Now this is going to take you quite a while to get to this stage in terms of installing it through the hub. I really hope this tutorial will more give you a sense of what is possible. I'm going to make a 3D. Project. Okay, so this is the Unity environment. It's a 3D piece of software, but it's designed to work live. In the shorthand really is that it's a game development software. So you have a range of views you can look at objects in, and they'll be determined on the way you control this little device here. So at the moment in this scene we have a camera and so let's put an object into the scene and just start to build something. So here is a cube, and we can see that the cube from a range of different perspectives, and there's a so what we've got is an X, Y, and a Z axis whereby we can see the object from different axi, and when you want to hold on a particular view you can lock it up here. So now you can't move that view. We can zoom in and zoom out and we can see that object. The game scene is really important because the game scene is the view from this camera. So if we move the camera relative to the object gets closer to the camera, and that's what you see in the game scene. So that's the rendered final file. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put the game scene, I'm going to drag it over into the other window. I'm going to drag it onto my projector over here, and then I'm going to scale it up real big, and then I'm going to focus it a little bit too. Now it's not going to make any difference because it's at quite a big angle, but there's my projection. So now you can see immediately what Unity can be useful for. Now, what you can do if you want to think about what a game can achieve, you can get different control systems that can control this camera, so you can move towards an object or move objects around themselves using a controller. I'm not going to show you any of that today, but it's possible and it's something that we could touch base on. It's just not a method of working that I do a lot of, but I could certainly facilitate that for you. So think about those aspects. So you can see that if you haven't used a 3D environment before, it's something you just going to want to practice. This camera is notated by, or it's understood, and for what it can see based on these kind of wireframes that come off it. Now we want to look at it probably from the top. So let's go in here and unlock this view, and then we'll click on a few of these cones until we see it from above. Now when we click it here, we can, just that camera gets in the way, we can see that it's a wide shot covering that kind of area. So that's fine. What I want to do here is I want to create a kind of object coming out of the wall kind of effect. So I want to put a texture onto some objects and change the lighting a bit and see what we can do in a really quick way to create some illusion. So you need to practice kind of maneuvering these different viewports. You can see that'll just depend how you go. The camera has a range of settings, so I'm moving it by clicking on these various triangles, and then I'm kind of keeping an eye on how it looks in this main camera. Now that's a lot to think about, right? Because I've got a little preview of it here, but it's also it's really happening over here to my right on my other screen. Okay, so we can click on any object or on the camera itself, and we can change its perspective. So we can change its field of view, which will it's like changing the lenses on a camera, making it zoom in or zoom out, or have more field of view, because zooming in or zooming out is more like actually physically moving the camera. And then we can click on the object itself, and I'll show you some of the other controls. So if we reach around this object from above, can't quite get to it because it keeps selecting the camera. Now, you've got all the objects in your scene here. We've got a main camera, a directional light, and a cube. So if we select the cube, we can go over here to some of our tools. We can move the cube around by grabbing these big objects here. We can spin the cube around, and we can scale it up. Now, to scale it, you don't grab the individual ends unless you want to change its perspective. You can see it bulging away there in the other shot. If you want to uniformly expand it, just grab it in the middle. And these are going to be tools that are pretty common. So if you've used 3D a lot, and we can skip ahead at some point if you haven't, just give yourself time. But once you understand these tools for manipulation, you'll be fine. Now, in 3D software, depending on what it's specialized in, you'll model and alter these objects a lot. Unity doesn't have a lot of that capability, so it's not going to be somewhere where you sculpt and build objects. It's going to be something where you bring objects in for them to react and play around with each other. So I'm just going to show you how to set up a basic scene that would be rendered with some of the ideas about lighting and perspective that you can achieve, and then work with it live. Unity is totally free, so that might be good, but if you want to create really complex 3D visuals that are detailed, and you don't mind if they're not live, then I also work with Cinema 4D, and I'll make you a quick tutorial of that very soon, maybe tomorrow. Okay, so we've got this object here, and we just want to set up a bit of a scene and have a look at how it's lit and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and turn the lights off. I'm just going to dimly lit my desk. Alrighty, so now that we've got this object here and we can see where it is relative to the camera, even that alone gives us some interesting things that we can do visually with this software that you may not have otherwise done. So what we want to do is I'm just going to light it a little bit with a little bit of shadow to get it to appear like it's truly coming off the wall, perhaps. So to do that, the first thing I want to do is put another object in it. I'm going to put a 3D, so you can see these are pretty easy to understand: quads, planes, text, a ragdoll, an object, person, a terrain. That's pretty interesting if you want to make pretty cheesy looking stuff, but you can certainly play around with that, trees and wind. So all I want to do, I'm very kind of, just to keep it simple, so I want to work with the plane here, and straight away we can see we get a little bit of sort of effect there. It still looks like I'm looking at a big sort of computer game. It's not going to not look like I'm looking at a computer game. But what we're trying to achieve here is some sense that object is really floating on the wall. Now, I'm rotating this object around. So that tool, basically, once you select rotate here, it gives you these 3 axes, but instead of pulling them, it gives you these kind of steering wheels. So we'll pull it around here. We can see that what you have to be very attentive to is the numbers, and you have to sort of plan ahead. It's not a free-form kind of way of working. You can't always wing it, so you need to have a sense of what you're trying to achieve, and then you will have to at some point punch in numbers to get things to be exact. And it just takes practice. So as I rotate this, you can see there's a number over here on the right hand side, and it's changing, and it says -82. Now we know that if I want it to be a flat plane, then if it was about 90 degrees, that would be pretty cool. And we know that it's worked because the plane, the actual color of the object and the color of the plane and the box have disappeared into each other. You can see on the wall there, they are no longer. So we know we've done something right. And again, that in itself, to me and my sensibilities, is an interesting thing to even be able to play around with. If you're interested in modernist painting, you can see that we can now create objects coming out of the wall. And because it works live, yeah, and because that's its main bend, that's pretty cool. So what we want to do is bring in a more specific type of light. This is the camera here. Now, we need to think about this camera's position relative to the position of my eyes, or importantly for you guys, the camera. So at the moment, the camera is at about, I don't know, 35 degrees from the wall. So we want to try to emulate that. So instead of the camera being right in front of the object, we want to move it over here. And you can see that as I do that, although the projection doesn't, although the object seems like it's moving away, what we are getting is a more realistic sense of the three-dimensionality. So what you need to understand with projection mapping and Unity is we need to figure out where the audience is going to be standing in relationship to this piece of work that we want to do. And it could be just a simple video that we want to put that has a shadow or a 3D object. I'm going to move through a few different options. So what we want to do is think, well, this camera sitting over here is kind of coming from the corner of the room across to the wall, so it needs to rotate. And you can actually kind of figure it out. And if you've got a space that you want to work in, you can do that too. So we want it to be angling across the room, yeah, because that's your point of view, not mine, but your point of view. And then we want to shift it. Now we can move around the scene over here by pressing the Option key, and we can have a look at it from above. So at the moment, the angle does not represent my room here, right? Because it is, that angle's really not severe enough, yeah? So we need it to be angling across the room, and then we need to place the object. So we click on it, and we should just be able to move it over to the corner of the room. Yeah? Now, at some point, I've shifted the other axis off a little bit because this object doesn't look right. What I wanted to do is sit in the middle of the room, and I want it to be coming out of the wall at such an angle that it looks appropriate. Now, okay, if I've grabbed it a bit wrong, that's fine, we can fix it, and we can start to fiddle with it as we go. So, we want it to be straight on, like that, and we want it to drag backwards and across. And it takes a little bit of fiddling. Now, these other numbers here, we want them to be on 0, because we want the object to be straight, like so. And what am I doing wrong? Am I being too severe with the angle? Perhaps. But it's from the angle that you're seeing it at. So that's what I'm getting wrong. So I'm sitting here looking at the screen here and going, that's not the right angle. But actually, as I look at the screen that you're looking at, it does look right. And that's how we've got to develop that perspective. So what I'll do is I'll leave the object there, and I'll just extend the plane, which will be the backdrop. Yeah. So I'll just go to the middle of it and extend it out. So it just is like an enormous wall. Cool. So that's straight as far as you can tell. The projector isn't straight. The projector maybe needs to just nudge a little bit, but that's pretty cool. Now, I know it's not doing much because the lighting is very, very harsh. And when you've got a directional light like you've got here, and that sits within the scene, yeah, it points in different directions, but it doesn't act like a real light like the sun would and change depending on where we put it. So we can move it around, but really, it's got one angle. And you can go up here to, when you select it, you can go up here and change that angle. And you can see that we can change the angle of that shadow. So at the moment, it can be like behind the wall, and then the sun can come up, etc., etc. Which is kind of cool, but let's change it. Instead of a directional light, we can actually have all sorts of different lights. So here's as you click it, you've got all these options over here of what each object that you've selected does. So instead of a directional light, we can choose a point light. And now the object is far too dark for you, but you'll be seeing it on the screen. And now has this cool kind of dark gothic kind of look on my screen, but on the wall you can see it's very, very faint. Now I can turn my light off and continue in the dark. And you can see there that it's now sort of just subtly popping out of the wall, which is pretty cool. So we can change the intensity, or we can change the proximity of the light. So here I'm looking at it from above, and I can change it so that it is closer, further away, and there's this sort of subtle light coming in there on my object. But a bit more intensity might be good. You can change the intensity by either changing the area that it is actually shining, so we can blow it right out. So you can have the size of the light, which is going to change the nature of that effect, or you can have some more intensity. So if we punch in 5 here, that'll blow that right out. We can bring it away like so. And that's obviously going to be a different kind of light. So there it is. I'm going to change that back to like 3, because you can only see so much on your screen. Now, if you think about these types of effects and what can be achieved in a live situation, then that's kind of what Unity can really bring. But let's have a look at materials and how we can import a three-dimensional object that you might have built, or has come off the internet, or has come from a 3D scan. But first, I just want to show you the idea about pressing play. So, because it's a game, at some point you start the game, you begin the game. Now, the really important thing to think about is how do you want to set up that game ready for play. So if you imagine these were characters or objects, even everything, the light included, you need to think about what you want, how you want it to progress, from a given point. That's because once we press play, everything we move will be reset to this position. I'll show you what I mean. You go up here and you press play, and then what we'll do is we'll go over and we'll resize this object to be full screen, and I think we can go full screen? No. So once we're finished, we can set this up as a package, but for the moment we're going to have that bar running across the top. But what we can do is, knowing that we've got it really perfect, we can now manipulate the scene, and that scene will render, so we can change objects, move them around. And so, if you're working with a live situation, you can change it as you go. So no big deal. But once you press play off, everything goes exactly back to where it was. So what is cool about it is that you can use this as a playtime, to move objects around and see what they look like. So if you're working in a strange environment, you could go play, and then you could go, all right, what would happen if we just flip this around, flip the object around? You can see what it would look like, and so on and so forth. Now, if you've done a lot of 3D and this is well below what you want to do, then that's cool. I just want to flag some of this because this might not be something you've done. Okay, so let's go through the process. You don't need to undo, I just naturally go undo. Now let's put some textures on there, and I'll brighten up my light just in case your video looks a little bit dull. Cool, just lighten it down. That's sort of, look, this is the aesthetic that I like, but whatever. Okay, cool. So what we want to do, and obviously you can change the colors of lights, and you can go to a spotlight, which will, hem in on a particular area. You've got strength, bias, all this sort of stuff you can fiddle around with. You can have a texture to the light, all that sort of stuff. Now, what we want to do is we want to look at the assets that I've created earlier in that quick clip. We've got a video of a pattern moving. We've got a pattern as a still picture. And we've got this one of a still pattern and a pattern moving. And just whip those up in After Effects so we had something to play with. And what we want to do is, over here in Assets, we're going to right click, and we're going to just import new assets. And we're going to go to projection tutorial and just bring in these. Let's bring all this stuff in. It's still going to be useful. Right, so this stuff comes up. Pretty cool. You can see what you've got. I've got this head that we're going to use that's going to stick out of the wall. That could be cool. And pattern, and it's going to be great. Okay, so what we're going to do is we can use this object, or we can use a different object, and we're going to apply. We're first going to make a material, and we're going to put the material onto the object. Cool. So what we want to do is go to materials, right click, go create, and we're going to create a material. And if what you want the material to do very much is something you need to decide, you know, so whether it's like whether you want to create a texture that the computer can render, or whether you want to add a JPEG or a PNG to the actual file, you need to figure that out. So in this instance, we're just applying a JPEG to a file. We want to select, so this is the new material. This is it here. You click on it once and it says shader. And then this is what makes the colors on the object. There's all sorts of things we can do. So what we want to do is go to legacy shaders down the bottom and go diffuse. And then basically it's very, very simple. It's just, this just tells us how the how the item that we're going to place onto the material will be tiled. I'll show you what I mean. We grab the object, just not sure which one is the JPEG and which one's the video. So the one that's the PNG, sorry, drag it, plop it in there. And then you can see that's going to tile it around. Now, if you want your texture to be repeated quite often, you just change the tiling to something more frequent, like if it's 90, then it looks like that. That's pretty crazy, but you know, it'll evenly tile it across the object. That's all you really need to do in order to get a static picture onto an object. Then you just drag it into the scene. You can see there it will automatically add it to the shape. Now, even though on this view on my screen it doesn't, it just looks really flat. On your view through the camera over here, you can see the outside of it, which is pretty cool. Just going to check that we're still recording. Yeah, great. I'll probably go with a little bit more light, and then you can see my face. No, you can't really see my face. There I am there. Okay, so cool. So now we've got this object, and we can rotate it relative to the scene. So the scene is set up so it looks like it's coming through the wall, and we can make it sit there and come in at an angle, and Bob's your uncle, right? So it's got a little bit of an uneven. Oh no, it's pretty even actually. Just got to make sure you know what you're doing. Now, we can control that with a joystick or with a button or all this sort of stuff. It's just not really something I do a lot of, but it'd be totally fine. You know, we could have it so that you could press buttons and it could move left or right or be controlled by the controller. I just want to show you what's possible visually. I'm going to turn this off again just to give you a sense of what we're creating there. I'm going to turn the light up as well to 10. Right, great. And then I can probably turn my light on and get a bit of me. Cool. So that's what we've got on the wall. And what I like to do is to create a true bit of projection mapping, obviously, is I like to light it so that the light begins and ends, right? And then if we are in the dark, we can give the impression that the object is swimming in the space. Whoa. I don't know what that effect was. I guess that was the camera adjusting. I think that is the camera, so I'm going to put the light back on. So you can see that depending on the way this is affected, the object will look like it's coming out of the wall or not. And that's something you can control. And it depends what you want to create. You know, if you want to create something live and visual and interesting, you can do that. It's up to you. So what do we want to do? Well, that's a texture, but what about a movie? Now, you can easily just go to go to the texture itself, and you can flap in anything you want. Now, depending, as long as we get the right one, so if we get the PNG, you can change it, it changes live, yeah? So we can also move the camera in so that, or make the object a bit bigger so that it takes up more space on the wall, and that might be more impressive visually as well. Again, you might be like, why does it have to be so dark, Joel? And I'm like, I don't really know. I don't have a great plan here. So to make a video, what we do is we go to the object directly. So we'll go to the cube and we'll go add component, and then we'll go video player. So down the bottom here, you can add heaps of components to objects, make them do different things. So what we'll do is we go here, and there's all sorts of stuff you can add and do. Tutorials are plenty. We're going to add a video player to the object, and then you can, let's see, I think you can drag it straight in. Yep. Now, drag it straight in, says that's cool, doesn't do anything. Here's where we need to play the video. So we go play, or play the game. And then Bob's your uncle. So now what we've got is that rotating texture. Now I can grab it at any time, remembering that when I press unplay, the object is going to go back to where it started. But I can start to freeform rotate that object, and the video will continue to play in real time. And that's starting to have more of a visual effect on the room.